Welcome to My Health Cebu. I am your host, Dr. Steven Seno, and we are going to talk today about the very important space, the internet. So our topic today is on cyber safety, and we have with us a very knowledgeable guest and an advocate for those of you who use that space. So I have with us today Father Fidel Orendain. He is a youth minister, and he will talk to us today about his experience in protecting others from a dangerous cyberspace and how to observe safety protocols in that space. So, Father Fidel, good day and welcome to the show. Okay, so Father Fidel, yes, it's a pleasure to have you, and then this topic is extremely timely, as a lot of us have gone online in order to communicate, to continue having lives during quarantine, so including entertainment and education. So, Father Fidel, I understand that apart from being a youth minister, you also teach. So can you tell us a little more about what you teach and how has the online experience been different for you?
Yeah, thank you. I teach communications. I mastered in social communications. It's a church subject.
Okay.
But right now, I do also give conferences for young people, not only about cyber safety, but more in particular about values education.
Right.
And shifting from classroom to online has been a Herculean task for both teacher and for students. It's
right.
A totally different ball game when it comes to preparing your lessons or even delivering your lessons. For one, you don't see your audience and you don't get to read their body language. You don't get to know exactly how to adjust. If they're bored, if they're interested, and sometimes they even put off their video cameras.
Oh.
So interaction is actually very limited. So it has been a very exhausting few months.
It can be. And then our generation, Father, if I may consider you as part of my generation, we're not digital natives. No, we're digital migrants. So it does take a little longer for us to adjust, but eventually we do get there. Whereas our students are more natives than we are, so they tend to occupy the space more comfortably. Is there a difference with regards to instruction from high school and college? Would you say that the college students are easier to teach than those in high school?
I consider myself a Gen Xer, and the audience in front of me would be a mix of Generation Z and Millennials.
Yes.
And you would think that Generation Z and Millennials, the Gen Y, would actually have no difference. But that's where the mistake lies. Both of these generations were born and immersed immediately in a technology environment, while we had to migrate to that environment. Right. But you see, generations are not anymore distinguished by, let's say, a decade or 2 decades. It's now almost distinguished by the digital or the technology that welcomes you. So you have a Gen Y that had they were born into the internet age, but the internet wasn't as fast as the internet now. And the gadgets were not as accessible to, as compared to Gen Z, who immediately would have at least one cell phone. Yes. Right now, you have Gen Z walking at least with 2 cell phones, a tablet, and the efficiency of using the laptop. Gen Y didn't have that, but now they're learning as fast as Gen Z. So my take here is, when I speak about generations, they are wired differently. Yeah. They learn differently. They absorb differently. And while we have to migrate not only in the use of technology, we also had to import new concepts. We cannot teach the same way as we were taught. That's the bottom line.
Okay. So we've been talking about this space that they now occupy for a good period of time. So we use cyberspace not just for work or for education, but also for leisure. So it does expose us more. We're more vulnerable in that sense as we spend more time on it. So Father Fidel, can you tell us a little more about what is cyber safety? So this is one of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. What is that idea of cyber safety?
I'd like us to take the word cyber in its new term. Cyber must have its roots in the Greek language. But every time we speak about cyber, it is essentially what pertains to information, computers, or the virtual reality. I'm just laying it down there.
Yes.
Now, you see, unlike us, unlike the Gen Xers or the 40-year-old and above, and unlike us, we were able to compartmentalize. You know, I want to play, I go to a playground. I want to read, I go to a library. I want to study, I go to a school. Imagine having everything on the palm of your hand. You don't have to walk. You don't have to change your environment. So in a way, it is easier for them, but they lose something there. So which means the protocols that we used to have when I enter a playground and I'm supposed to behave in a certain way, I'm entering a library, I'm supposed to behave in a certain way. Imagine merging all places together, which essentially means merging all behaviors together. So there lies now the confusion when the traditional protocols and ways of behaving are suddenly blended, and there is in some sense there is a loss of identity. And that's why minsan you see kids confused why they're being scolded if they're behaving in a certain way. So the disconnect here is psychological and even physical. So imagine, we know that we have to be careful when we are in the playground. But now the playground is the screen, the 12-inch screen in front of them. We know that we have to be quiet in a library, but the library is in their room, which essentially they can do 5 things at the same time. So even the safety requirements are actually being stretched and redefined here. So while adults were very, very careful about what's good and bad, the younger generation seems to be right now confused. And they're more confused if the older generations are the one dictating the terms of behavior and the terms of the parameters on what to explore and what not to explore. So when we talk about cyber safety, it is a very, very fluid place, especially if ang mag-uusap will be the younger generation and the older generation. All in all, when we talk about cyber safety, is the prevention of any possible harm that could happen with an individual who is engaging both with the technology and the contents that the technology provides. So that's a very, very big definition, and it will change depending on what you are looking at and using and what you are actually facing in front of a technology. Right. So this definition will still change.
The behaviors are developed in part with social interactions as well as by the environment. And that explanation that you gave us tells us that the environment has changed and the interactions are different. So hence, you can expect that behaviors may be different. And they may not align to that we expect from those who grew up in a more traditional setting, outside the cyberspace. And again, there's a vulnerable population. So for people who are navigating through this environment, there is a population that is vulnerable. So meaning those who are younger or those who are not very knowledgeable as to how to sidetrack dangers. So what apart from, I guess there are physical dangers or there's physical harm from being in this space too long. So I guess problems with the eyes, with sleep, with mental health. But with mental health, with the emotional well-being of a person, how does the cyberspace affect that, in your opinion, Father?
First, there is the content. Okay, there's the content by itself is going to be very, very challenging. Yes. Those who take care of babies would know that you don't give solid food immediately. Yes. You give incremental. You know this stuff. Right. But the child, sometimes when they open the computer, there are no parameters. So even if the parents say don't explore this, don't explore that, when the parent is looking, the child just goes anywhere in cyberspace, right? So the early exposure to content that are not child friendly, they would already have immediate impact on the way how the child thinks and the way how the child behaves. So by itself, that is already a warning sign that could actually change the child's behavior. Then there is the time spent using the technology. You know that if you spend too much time using technology, you have less time using other stuff or getting exposed to what is essentially important for the growth of a child at a certain level. So there is the content, there is the time, and there is also the interaction that happens, and there enters the possibility of the child either being bullied or the child becoming the aggressor and the bully.
That's right. Okay.
And these are things that come into play, and we do not have a complete what to do now, the instruction book in case these things happen.
Right.
For many generations, parenting had a very similar template. A generation would say, I will raise you the way I was raised.
Right.
We cannot do that right now because the next generation would have, might have a technology that the previous generation didn't have. And even the roles of parenting and the adult have actually essentially been disturbed. Normally, it would be the adult who would teach a child how to navigate certain things in life. How do you use, let's say, how do you cook? What do you do? How do you put on the stove? Etc., etc. But in many times, because technology is already, it's developing by leaps and bounds. Many times, it is the younger generation who would know how to operate, who would go into the intricacies of managing the technology. And so it is occasionally, perhaps several times, it will be the younger generation telling the adults how to navigate certain technologies. So nabago yung pagmamano,
Dynamics.
yung dynamics, in that certain way. Do I say is it dangerous? No, I'm just saying that the dynamics have changed. Even anyone who teaches actually has the sense of authority, right? In social sciences, the teacher has an authority. Imagine a child teaching an adult. So nagkakaroon siya ng sense of authority, and a powered play dynamics is more or less disturbed there.
Okay, that's an interesting thing na I did not even come to realize, na nag-iiba yung shared na ngayon yung learning. Instead of it going from parent to child, the child now has something to teach the older generation or the parent. In some cases, in extended family households, meron pang grandparent, And then, how does the child react to this authority that he somehow developed, or skill set from which he derives some pride, some authority, baka ma-disdirect or may cause problems within that dynamic. So, Father, you mentioned briefly the concept of cyberbullying. So, we understand that bullying is a topic that has been quite important to younger generations, maybe not so much ours, because it does impact the way the child will eventually grow, and learn. Very, very more so in school settings. And now that school has migrated to online, to the cyberspace, we also see bullying in that area too, in that platform as well. And if so, Father, how does it manifest? How do you know that cyberbullying is going on, and how would one define cyberbullying now?
Well, the definition of cyberbullying actually comes into a push and pull dynamics also. Because even as we speak right now, there will be schools of thought that will actually look into the different shades of defining it. The easiest definition is to separate cyber and bullying. So when they define bullying, it is the harm intended to someone. But the old definition of bully is very important, and it gives us specific elements. For example, the old definition of what is bullying is, more or less physical and psychological. There are 4 common elements of bullying. One, it is repetition, the power imbalance, the intention, and the aggression. By repetition, it means like, it will not be a bullying, for example, if someone pushes you in the playground. But if someone regularly pushes you in the playground every time it is physical education subject time, that becomes a criteria for bullying. But it's not yet the bullying. But if a little boy before pushes you in the playground and you are the bigger boy, the teacher would say that's not bullying.
Yes.
Because there's no power imbalance at the time, not unless the bigger person is psychologically impaired.
Yes.
Then there is the intention. The intention in the classic definition of bullying must be to hurt someone, deliberately hurt. Then there is the aggression. It depends on the action. Sometimes, pag pinitik ka, maybe it's not considered bullying, not unless masakit talaga, di ba? But
Paulit-ulit.
paulit-ulit. Pero aggression in terms of there's a difference between pinitik ka at sinuntok ka. So these 4 elements, they tried to merge it by putting the word cyber. So meron mga tao that says, let's not use the 4 elements kasi nag-iba na eh. May mga tao siya nagsasabi, hey, let's use the same 4 elements in the context of cyberbullying. I'll give you an example. Halimbawa, may nagbully sa isang bata sa internet. Let's say, minura siya, etc. But one time lang. Tapos sasabihin naman, hindi pa bullying yun kasi isa lang naman eh.
Yes.
But the other advocates would say, na-forward eh. So the repetition was not only from one person. It becomes multiple persons. So nagkakaroon ng repetition. But there's going to be a little difficulty in terms of applying policies there. Kasi yung isa pinost ko lang isang beses eh. Hindi, so bakit ako ipapunish? Tinukso ko lang naman. Inulit yung tukso by forwarding it. So there's now, nare-repeat siya. Now, in terms of power imbalance, we would note that almost 50-50 ang chance na yung nagsa-cyberbully is nabully siya, gumaganti siya. So, when you'll have to redefine power imbalance. Sometimes, in the physical bullying, for example, power imbalance is someone is taller, someone is bigger, someone is richer, or someone holds an office. Kitang-kita mo talaga yung discrepancy of power. Diba? But in cyberbullying, someone who's a small guy, let's say a first year, and then suddenly binully siya ng fourth year, gaganti siya. Iba yung definition ng power imbalance doon. Diba? Siguro, masasabi mo lang, ang power imbalance doon is maybe the younger one, the weak one, has more facility in using technology to get back.
Right.
Now, there will be occasions when ang hirap i-define ng cyberbullying kasi they were friends, nagtuksuhan. Iba lang yung definition nila of what's harmful and not. Di ba? I mean, we regularly tease each other. I'll give you another example. May naglolokohan bata. So, nagtutuksan sila. Brown jokes of boys, When we talk about brown jokes, it's about the fart, etc. Ganun. So, they were posting stuff about each other, which is okay. The intention was just to make fun. But here comes the mom who sees the picture, reports it in school, and reports it as cyberbullying.
Okay.
Diba? From the mom's point of view, it is a painful thing that yung son niya was shamed.
Right.
Nag-viral. But for the boy, it was fun. And ang boy ang nagsasabi, Ma, it's okay. It was fun. No, it's not. Mga ganon. Sasabihin ng mami, pag nag-apply ka sa trabaho, pag ginugol to, makikita pa tong picture na to.
Yeah.
So, intention wasn't there and the level of aggression medyo
May
wala.
mababa din.
Pero maybe from the level of the school, the authority or the parents, they would like to categorize this as cyberbullying. So what I'm trying to say here is there are still nuances.
Yes.
As there was in the classic physical bullying, di ba? So meron pa ring nuances. Kaya nga it's there's no classic thing na you look at it, face value, cyberbully. Maybe yung iba clear, but yung iba medyo hindi eh. Parang there has to be a context to this. Kaya maski kami when we investigate cyberbullying, we actually say let's slow down, let's not jump into conclusion because we will be falling into the habit of social media na ang bilis natin mag-judge, di ba?
That's right. Okay.
So, Father Fidel, we need to go to a break, and then when we come back, we'll go into that further. And then for the audience who's just catching up with us, we're talking about cyber safety and into the topic of cyberbullying. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about interventions that can be performed in order to protect oneself from cyberbullying. So come join us. Welcome back. You are watching My Health Cebu with your host, Dr. Steven Seno, and with us today is our very passionate resource person, Father Fidel Orendain, who has been talking to us about cyberspace and things that you have to be careful as you enter that space. And before we went to a break, we were talking about cyberbullying, and apparently there is a definition that you have to know, which includes several aspects that we discussed earlier. And then Father Fidel, during the break, you mentioned something about different kinds of cyberbullying. Something about a direct and indirect. Can you expound on that further?
The direct cyberbullying is when when my message or my action is directly focused on the recipient. I am the sender, and the recipient of my message, my action is that person. Sometimes it's going to be indirect. I post something about a person at hindi naman nila natatanggap, nababasa ng iba. And the actions of the other people are the ones that change towards the individual. So medyo it took a curve before it reached the individual. Di ba? So they still have to establish a criteria about that. Now, this direct and indirect cyberbullying gives birth to several terms that keeps on getting longer.
Right.
And it comes to the forms of cyberbullying that we now have. For example, exclusion is a form of cyberbullying.
Yes.
You're in a class. Someone organizes, let's say, a page for a chat room. Hindi ka kasama. That's considered cyberbullying.
Okay.
Harassment is cyberbullying, okay? Which means it's an action that's generally sustained and it's constant. Okay? Then there is also the outing. When you expose something private, or when you expose even something untruth, that's called an outing, or sometimes they call it the doxing.
Wow.
Then there is the trickery. The trickery, it combines with other definitions also of phishing. No? I'll explain phishing later on. For example, someone befriends another person, but only to be tricked into to saying something or doing something. Then they post it and everything. That's called trickery. Then there is cyber stalking. Okay, when someone continues to follow what you post, pero ano ka, weird yung mga inaan niya, and regular. That's cyber stalking. Then of course there is the another word is frapping. No, when let's say a child's social network. A child's social network is used by someone else to post inappropriate content with their name. So may nag-invento ng account, tapos post siya ng post, pero hindi siya yon. Para I know of several priests na meron silang Facebook account, but hindi kanila. That's actually frapping. Okay? It overlaps a little bit with masquerading, no? When they create a profile, pero yung masquerading is I will create a profile with an avatar para hindi ako mahabol, pero I'm harassing someone else. Diba? Then there's the dissing, okay? It's an act bully spreading cruel information. Pareho to ng outing. Then there's the trolling. It combines with frapping, but trolling is wala tong gagawin except to harass you and to say bad things about you. It combines with another kind of cyberbullying, which is called flaming. No? It constitutes posting about talagang insulting you, giving you profanity, etc. Then there will of course be the sexting, which is popular among teenagers. Sometimes sexting is an agreement between the two people who exchange it, or sometimes it is only one way. When someone keeps on sending sex messages or photos to someone who doesn't like it, that's called sexting. These are, and funny thing is, it's not going to stop with this list. It's going to give birth to other, because the technologies are evolving very fast.
And parang nakaka-overwhelm, no?
Nakaka-overwhelm
because
talaga.
parang tapos yung ibang terms pa nga, to be honest, Father Fidel, this is the first time I'm hearing of them. saka parang yung ibang terms, para sa akin, neutral pa siya, parang yung masquerading. Di ba? Masquerading, wala, masquerade, nagmamaskara ka. Tapos yun pala, it has a negative connotation because you are you're not yourself, no? Parang ang lakas ang loob mo kasi hindi naman kita yung mukha mo, hindi naman kilala, no? So I guess our kids, teenagers, young adults, they're all vulnerable to this, no? So we want to protect them from being the recipient, and as well as preventing them from being the instigator or being the bully themselves, no? So how do we go about that? What can we do on the different levels of intervention? So may self, may family, may school, may community. What can we do to protect victims and to prevent bullies from becoming bullies?
Yeah, there are two areas where I am particularly interested in. One is the level of the intervention of the parents, and the other one is the intervention of the school. About 75% of cyberbullying happens in the context of the school. Ibig sabihin, mag-classmate or mag-schoolmate, dyan, the encounters happen there. With the exception of the pandemic times where there are no physical schools, mag-iiba na naman yung dynamics, no? Now, when it comes to parenting, importante talaga that parents are knowledgeable. Knowledgeable about the intricacies of technology, but also sana parents could actually make themselves expert in child growth. And I think this is where you could help to encourage parents to know about child psychology, the basics of that, especially adolescent psychology when people start experimenting. Now, my recommendation to parents is, number one, be able to talk to your children, okay, about respecting others, about how doing bad things can hurt others. Parents need to talk to their children to explain the consequences of their actions, because we know that decision making siguro on the development of the brain does not happen until 20 plus years, no, in the development of the brain. So parents actually need to accompany these kids here. Now, to do that, they must be able to demonstrate appropriate internet use. Ang nakakatakot dito is the disconnect of what parents tell their kids and what the parents they're actually doing. Sasabihin ng tatay, "Wag kang manood diyan kasi masama sa iyo 'yan." Masama para sa lahat 'yan, so wag mong gawin, di ba?
That's right.
So also parents must become involved in their children's cyberspace exposure. They must become involved. They need to ask, sometimes know what the kids are actually playing, if it's too violent or too graphic, etc. This is something unpopular, but many parents don't know how actually to implement restrictions of gadget use. Restrictions must still be there, di ba? Alam natin that the gadget is amoral. It's neither bad nor good. So is the knife. But it depends on who holds it, di ba? I will not hand a knife to a 2-year-old. Kasi even if, kahit gaano ko siyang turuan nun, eventually he will harm himself.
Right.
Diba? Ganon din yung gadget. I know of a parent na ang problema ng anak is ang baba ng grades.
Right.
Okay, ang baba ng grades kasi hindi nagko-concentrate, nade-distract ng technology. Tapos for Christmas, ang binigay Nintendo, medyo mahirap 'yon. That's a disconnect sa message, no? Some parents are recommended to put the computers at least sa public space ng bahay, para na-check nila yung bata nila if they're opening spaces that are not for them or if messages are coming in, di ba?
Right.
And some parents even go to the extent of coming up with contracts, internet use contracts with kids, consequences pag itong nangyari.
Right.
Now, the high-tech parents, they put filters in their computer. But this is just the 5% of parents na marunong maglagay ng filter. Because alam ng bata, they could go to YouTube and break the, and break the firewall or tanggalin yung filter. So wala rin. Parents gave up on this. But most importantly, children must be taught to protect themselves. Children must not only be taught to protect themselves, but also parents must build self-confidence. Alam mo, as educator, the old formula of education used to be, I will teach the children so that they will be successful. Diba? But right now, the formula is, I will teach kids today not only to be successful, that's one of the aims. But we aim beyond that. We would want that they aim that even if they don't hit the success flag or they reach the flag and they fail, they are taught how to pick themselves up. Alam ko, in the language of intelligence, this is AQ. Diba? But for many generations, we just focus on IQ. Then suddenly in the 80s, someone told us that there is the EQ, the emotional quotient.
Right.
Okay? Not knowing that as we go along, as we went along, there is the adversity quotient. Now we notice this kasi the immersion of the child with gadgets has allowed them instant gratification. And alam natin as a child grow with instant gratification, may nababawas sa kanya eh. Diba? The capacity for self-control, self-regulation natatanggal. Bumababa yung EQ niya. So which means, when he is hit with a failure, he cannot react. Here comes sadness, here comes depression, here comes the thought of an easy way out. Nakakaawa yung bata eh. Akin, I'm really saying right now that there is a connection between the lowering of an AQ in a child's mind and the level of exposure that he has with gadgets. I know a thesis needs to be done, but gut feeling mo lang, alam mo that the child who overspends too much time getting all his knowledge and his experience in a gadget, something is lost. Ang ganda nung sinabi ni Marshall McLuhan dito when he speaks about technology, especially of ICT. Sinasabi niya, the gadgets and the technology that mankind invents are their extension. You know, the phone is the extension of his human voice. The car is the extension of his feet. Ang ganda nung pag-explain niya. But, mind you, for every extension, an amputation happens. Whether in the mind, psychologically, or in the body, physically. Nag-imbento tayo ng bisikleta na wala yung prowess natin for traveling longer. Nag-imbento tayo ng microphone, humina yung boses natin, yung capacity to speak louder. Nag-imbento tayo ng computer and Google, the thinking process and the processing, you know, the thinking process suddenly nagkaroon ng ceiling, no? You would know this. Try to give a child 4-paragraph poem to memorize. It will take him a long time. Kasi the concept of pwede ko tong information can be Googled. Unlike us, we will reserve the encyclopedia, you know, wait for the person who has the letter L to M and that's the topic of our research. Now, no one lines up. Information is instantaneous. So, I'd really like the parents, kung nawala ito, ano yung pwede mong substitute sa bata mo? Diba? When parents are conscious about what happens, the amputations that occur in a child's life, what substitutes can you actually give? I used to play taguan, hide and seek. And I know that it built my persistence, my creativity, where to hide, di ba? Right. Ginagabi ko, hindi ko pa nahanap yung nagtago. Pala nagnanood na ng sine.
Okay.
Di ba? Pero your persistence is there, no?
Yeah.
I mean, with the disappearance, not only of traditional games, but many of the things that we do and the values that they espouse, whether in school or at home, we cannot equate a substitute. Kasi many of the things that we used to do in the different fields is now confined in this space.
Right. Okay.
I'll give you a scientific example, and it pertains to our school. I grew up in a technical school where we were allowed to handle lathe machines at 14 and 15. When you look at it right now, these are 8 to 10 feet monsters. Malaki, gears and everything. And attention ang sinasabi sa amin ng brother is, pay attention, treat this with respect. So it will respect you. Which means, madistract ka, putulang daliri mo. I was 14, 15. I'm afraid of giving the same experience to my younger generation. Bakit? Nasanay sila. I'm saying that these machines are 8 to 10 feet. Now, nasanay sila of looking and focusing their attention on a 6-inch screen. Yan lang. Their peripheral visions, in the doctor's term, baka nag-atrophy na. Yung muscles that allowed them to move the eyes from left to right.
Right.
And there is a study that bumababa talaga yung psychomotor reaction nila when driving. Hindi nila nakikita yung what's extremely on the side, which they should be able to do so that they could react to avoid an accident. Medyo nag-freeze eh.
Ito.
This is a direct physical application to that. So I'm just asking the parents, once you give something to your child, maybe you'd also ask, what are you depriving this child of? Nakikita nyo lang, oh, ito, may advantage na yung bata ko.
But what does it take away? No, having giving it.
What does it take away?
So,
Diba? What does
so
it
Father Fidel, again, thank you for that analogy. Such a great analogy to understand how technology will affect a child. No, so we need again to go into another break, and as we come back, we'll probably talk about what the school and the community can do before we go briefly into healing from cyberbullying. So come join us, and as we come back from this break. And with our special guest, Father Fidel Orendain, a youth minister who is also an advocate for cyber safety and who has led us into this conversation about cyberbullying. So before we went into a break, we were talking about how the family should intervene and protect the child from this form of abuse. And then we'll discuss about what the school and the community can do from protecting the vulnerable population of children and adolescents from being victims of cyberbullying. So Father, what does the school have to play here? What is the role of our education institutions to protect children as they spend most of their time online from being victims of cyberbullying?
A school prevention program for cyberbullying must be comprehensive. It starts first with knowing and defining what cyberbullying is and explaining this to all stakeholders, to teachers, to parents, and to the students. Secondly, with the definition, the school can come up with strong policies. They should put policies in their proper place. And here's important, update these policies. You cannot put a policy and keep it for 3 years because the technologies continue to evolve. After this, staff, they would have to be trained, including the teachers. Upskilling has to happen. Okay? Concepts have to happen. Particularly the guidance counselor need to be able to, to know the new stuff that happens in the lives of kids. Many of the things, when a guidance counselor graduates and finds a job, let's say in a school, that space, things have already changed. I'm sad that not all schools actually offer counseling for victims of cyberbullies. Not yet. Kasi hindi pa ito naturo tapos nagkaroon ng cyberbullying. The other one is, if cyberbullying happens in school, the school has to employ internet filtering to filter the technology to ensure that kids are actually safe. Okay, the one important thing, the school must always be in conversation with the parents so that the school can educate the parents. Sometimes the disconnect would be there's a policy in school but it is not supported with the leniency that happens at home. Bawal ito sa school, pwede ito sa mama. The school says, control your gadget use, your screen time. Pagdating sa bahay, no limits. Di ba? So, school has to talk to parents. Remember, cyberbullying does not happen as an isolated case. The bully does not wake up and say, today I will be a bully. Someone or something creates the bully. Sinasabi nila 85, even higher %, the bully was a victim himself. And so as this bully grows up, he wants to be a bully. So on and so forth. The cycle never stops. So when a child is bullied, ang unang itatanong ng guidance counselor is, how's home? Diba? Is there a disparity in, maybe in power or anything? Or ito yung bata, masyadong inuutusan, etc. So the parents must be inside the conversation here. Now the classmates must actually, or the school, the students must be taught that it is not enough for them not to bully. It is important for them not to engage or not to tolerate the environment.
Right.
The passive audience, the person who stands and watches a bully do his stuff, is as bad as the bully himself. Because the bully needs an audience, lalo na sa physical bullying. May nanununtok ng bata ng bubugbog, they need an audience. Kasi it boosts them up. So when someone is being bullied in the cyberspace, students should not pass it. Kasi ang saya nung isa ang dami na nung ano niya nagiging viral and he becomes popular, albeit even if he's not known. Okay? So my point here is create a child-friendly space in school and at home. And these two areas must be able to have consistent, not only policies, but consistent environment for the child to grow.
So, Father, in your experience, kapag may na-identify and documented bully, how does the school intervene? What is there a sanction? Is he suspended? Given a warning? Paano yun?
Yeah, but normally there is the process of gathering of data. A team or at least 3 people are actually asked to inquire or investigate the whatever has happened, diba? And all concerned parties are called. Yung nabully, yung nang-bully, the advisor, then the parents are also called. Of course, there are policies. Ito lang yung nakakaawa dyan kasi sometimes sometimes the denial thing goes there. It's not always easy to prove who invented this page, who sent the message. Ang hirap niyan The school, for example, does not have the capacity to be a cyber sleuth, to be an inspector or detective, no? It has to be, let's say, an NBI or everything or ganon. Depends also on the gravity of the offense, diba? Sometimes pag nakikita natin that grabe yung damage that it has caused, then talagang punishments has to be done, disciplines have to be applied, and it has happened in many schools.
Okay. So, how do we help both victim and bully? So, how does the healing begin for both parts? No? At kasama na rin siguro yung audience. No? You mentioned earlier that if you are complicit, no, you are a passive spectator, you are encouraging the bully to do something. No? So how does all the parties heal? How would you recommend? What are the tips?
The school takes the opportunity as a teaching moment sa parents, sa bata, kasi sometimes it's out of ignorance na nangyari yun. He enters a chat room, he does not know, etc. He sends his own photo and the photo is misused. So ignorance yun. The debriefing happens for the parents, for the child, and for the bystanders or for those who forwarded it. So they will be taught basically consequences. Diba? Paano kung sa'yo nangyari to? So empathy is developed there. And responsibility is touched there. Alam naman natin that when values are lacking, or perhaps values were not exactly taught properly, na hindi napapractice nung bata what should be practiced. Values need to be inculcated. But sometimes the kids don't know that yung pagkaturo ng value is akala nila para lang dyan. Hindi nila natatransfer na same to pwede mo. As for example, respect. Diba? They thought respect is, okay, I don't change in public, that's respect. I greet my elders, that's respect. Not unless tinuro talaga that when you actually tease or beat up someone weaker or someone who has less, that's disrespectful rin. When you morph or when you edit a photo and you make fun of a person and this person gets hurt, that's disrespectful. Sometimes the examples have to be almost in detail para hindi nila gawin. Diba? So that's one. The other thing that has to come into play here is the knowledge that boys and girls may konting difference when dealing with this. Sometimes, and I don't say this to hurt someone, but in many cases, girls can be more mean when it comes to talking ill of other people. The classic word for that will be chismis, but I don't want to be politically incorrect. I'm just talking about statistics that say that sometimes girls can be more mean when it comes to verbal cyberbullying. Now, the healing process of a wounded girl might be different from the process of a wounded boy. Kasi sa lalaki, because physical sports or barkadahan has allowed us to be sort of flexible, malleable when it comes to aggression, di ba?
That's right.
Nakaka-recover tayo agad. Kasi yung tuksuhan natin medyo direct.
Oo.
I mean, sometimes ang tuksuhan natin, huy, batignom.
Oo nga,
Huy,
exactly.
lagom.
Oo.
And these are normal things. But
Yeah.
parents who are sensitive, uy, my son was bullied. Mom, we went into that because they had names for each other. And you know that these names stick because sa reunion nyo, alam nyo, uy, si ano ba nandito? That's
Oo.
the nickname given.
That's right. That's right.
It has stuck for 30 years. Di ba? And remember our time, iba yung concept natin of political correctness.
Right. Right.
Di ba? We were having fun and we didn't know it was actually going to be wrong in the next 10 or 15 years.
Right.
We made jokes about the sizes of people, the color,
Mhm.
the shape of the hair,
Anything
the accents that we have.
different about you, no? So parang, and in this world of inclusivity, no, we come to accept people for being different and unique. Parang hindi na siya politically correct, no? Parang outdated na yung concepts natin. So, Father, we're it's such a great talk, no? I wish we had more time, but we're about to wrap up, and I will now give you a couple of minutes to talk directly to our audience so that we can impart upon them something very important that you'd like to tell them about the cyber safety, possibly about cyberbullying. So, Father Fidel Orendain, I now give you the floor.
I'd like to address first myself to those who have been cyberbullied. Number one, don't blame yourself. Okay? There's a time that you will feel sad and even depressed. But know this, you are not alone. You could always ask help. Do not be ashamed to ask help from your elders. Okay? I know sometimes we're inclined to ask help from our peers. But your barkada, your best friend, might not give always the smartest advice. Ask help from adults who you know really care and who are knowledgeable about cyberbullying. Be patient with yourself. You will feel down for a while, but you will get to heal. Some healings need interventions, but some healings come naturally. And here's my advice. Go into media diet. Once in a while, unplug the technology. Now, if you're bullied, unplug the technology, breathe the air, see the sights. You know, there's so much you might be missing because you are staring on your phone, on your tablet. Once in a while, walk without any gadget. Just look into the sky, look into the trees. Keep in touch with people who really matter on a real face-to-face basis. It strengthens not only your character, but more importantly, it enriches you. You're missing when you are not looking at someone's body language, on their expression. Relationship on a face-to-face level is such a beautiful thing. Now, keep in mind the good interactions that happen online, but the better interactions that also happen offline. Now, I address myself to those who bully, okay? One day there will be another bully who will be stronger than you, and you would not want that this bully inflicts hurt sa inyo. So, my point here is this. Let us be sensitive and more compassionate to our peers. These are people. They have feelings, okay? Let us learn to practice sympathy. Sometimes our overexposure to violent games deprives us from the sympathy that we should nourish inside our hearts. And finally, parents and teachers. The panorama of technology, the environment of technology is growing leaps and bounds, and they are burying young people. Once in a while, we have to do the right thing of taking them away from this garbage of technology, even if it's very useful for a time. But once in a while, we need to bring out the child, okay? They're growing to become, they're now growing up like Borgs or
Right.
cyborgs.
Works talaga, right?
Because they're speaking, they're acting like their technology, they're behaving like their technology, when these are simple children. At the end of the day, you are looking at a child. No matter how good he is with the technology, he is still a child. And the most important learning a child has to have should not come from YouTube or Google. It can only be given by an adult who cares for the nourishment and the growth of a child. That's all.
Okay, so Father Fidel, again, thank you. Those are very strong and encouraging words, and we hope that our audience today has learned about cyber safety and how to protect and recover from cyberbullying. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Dr. Steven Seno, and again, thank you, Father Fidel and I. And you guys stay safe.